Greetings, everyone. I'm Nathan Lusley. I am the editor and publisher of the Maryland Literary Review, as well as the host of the Reston Readings reading series. This is our very first fall reading in 2022. And this evening, we will spotlight authors from the spring issue of the Maryland Literary Review. A few words about Maryland Literary Review and Reston Readings before we get rolling. First of all, this is our 5th year in existence, which I'm really excited about. We're a biannual, and even though the name might speak to the locality of the authors, we actually feature authors from all over, and we don't particularly focus on any theme, any outstanding theme or type of work. We just like what is good. So there's no particular rhyme or reason for publishing any particular piece other than just the quality. So check it out. It's marylandliteraryreview.com. We're really proud of it. And this evening we will feature authors from the spring issue 2022 Maryland Literary Review, or MLR, I also call it. As for Reston Readings, this is our 7th year in existence, and we usually are located in person at the Reston Hughes Bookshop. Future readings will happen in October and November and possibly December. We have a sort of a catch-all in October with featuring a variety of authors and an open mic. November will be our Washington Writers Publishing House reading. And there are Facebook pages for both the Maryland Literary Review and for the Reston Readings, so please check those out. So this evening we'll feature 9 authors from Maryland Literary Review. And we will start with Terry Blackhawk.
Okay, am I on? Can you hear me? All right, good. Thanks so much, Nathan. I'm really happy to start off the reading tonight. The poem that's in the Maryland Literary Review is the title poem of a chapbook that I have coming out from Alice Green and Company, a wonderful little press out of Ann Arbor. The title of the poem is also the title of the book, Mommy, Mommy. The book memorializes my late life love, the artist from Toledo, Neil Frankenhauser, who died in 2019. And this poem is about sitting alongside his Mommy River, his sort of sacred river where he would go to paint with him. It's a haibun. I'm going to start my timer, sorry. Mommy, Mommy. Fish leap and splash, grasses' heads toss in the wind, the bowed over, weighted down willows swish and sigh, and the river itself, moment by moment, now rippled, now smooth, with its swoop of swallows, traffic from the bridge, an endless roar of sea. Mommy, Mommy. I sing it, oriole hopping from branch to branch, small leaf cutter on the edge of my page, fingers stained with the green of an oil pastel, house finch weaving its song, song sparrow cranking up in the understory. I sing the warble rush flow, gritting of teeth, orange truck rushing past the nothing that is here except these gnats dancing in front of my eyes. I am long gone water from the bottle, orgasmic fizz, tornado at night passing us by. I wade the water, but do not go in. So yes, Payne's grays, a kind of bluish black, excellent for painting stormy skies. And yes, sun sparkle, flashes of dilatory bobble, flish, a fish flips up from the surface. Smooth the paint on the panel, sweetie, dive, won't you? And don't argue. My tone is your tone, your town, your tongue. Kayaks floating past, and Sunday afternoons by our own Grand Jeté. Pigeons that fly up. The necessary dark. No notes, just the way that warbler bounced and climbed each available twig. And Neil left me with quite a few paintings, and this is a poem I wrote based on a painting that is in my house in Connecticut, and I actually wrote it the night he was dying. I didn't realize it at the time, but I did. The poem is called Of Course. Of course you are not here, but you left me these tilted telephone poles from the 1920s, a car I can almost see, and a triangular warning sign in bright red contrast to the deep ochre and cobalt shadows crossing the center line of the road. It could be the way your dusky trees in the background swell against the horizon, amorphous there beyond the vanishing point, which is, of course, where you are now, or almost, on the verge of taking your last breath. But this road you gave me led me into sleep so often, I'll go down it now, keeping track and, of course, also not. This garage on the right, I could pull into it on an ordinary day, find perhaps a path alongside and a bungalow a few paces ahead, its porch half hidden by bushes. I'll meet you there. And I'll have one more. This is called Singing You Up. Today, I cannot fathom news from the waves or the calendar established by the bees, but something in the moon last night, waxing for the 5th time since you died, with planets in their astonishing alignment, has me reaching across miles, not to your house, emptied of all but your art, but to your bench, your painting spot, alongside the Maumee, your family and I gathered for the scattering. We shivered and sang and said some words, Nels's shoulder, a broad comfort to lean against, and then his arm swinging back and forth like a peasant sowing grain in a field. This is not him, but the box he came in, said Nick, flinging the not you out from the shore. A larger bit of grit pierced my palm in the fistful of you I held, then tossed into mist. Goodbye, darling, I told the air. The river flowed slowly past, and the clouds of you spat on its surface, hissing like rain or fat on a skillet, as we stood there on that muddy ground, singing you up, knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door, casting you out into your stream. Thank you.
Wonderful, Terry. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Nathan. It's
Of course,
lovely to be here.
absolutely. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Okay, next up we have Ace Bagas. Not sure if I pronounced your last name correctly, Ace, but please correct me on that. And
Right.
You're here to tell us about black mold and other such things.
Surprisingly, yes, you did pronounce it correctly, and that's not a common thing. Thanks, Nathan, for inviting me to this. I really enjoyed being in Maryland Literary Review, the 2 or 3 times you've had me in there. But I also wanted to say that I appreciate your short stories too, which are incredible. So this is the poem from this issue. Black mold, no clever patter for it. It just is what it is. Black mold. I never would have noticed were it not pointed out during my uncle's quest that confounded many scholars of the forms of curving waterline drains. There, in back of the sink's cabinet, a stripe that could have been glue or a quirk in the design. That's real bad, he says. Black, to be sure, like a teen stick poking a meteorite before ending up swallowed by jelly in the blob. Does that make me young Steve McQueen, cocksure, hot rodding, ready to save the day? No, I prefer to run, even if it dooms the earth to be the old fruit and aspect. I'm going to read one other poem. This is from my new book, Escape Envy. It's a political poem, so it is out of date at the moment, thankfully. But with the news of the last couple of days, I thought it'd be a good day to dust it off. Negative definition. Imagine my philosophy prof from 1990, sophomore year, his crescent-haired lagoon of scalp, his monotone Eeyore voice saying, "Don't think about the president. You can't not. When you consciously attempt to conjure a negative, you summon its opposite. Don't think about the head of state," I tell myself. I try, but there he comes, strutting dumbly across my screen as though I've pulled him from a hat and now must listen to him jabber about what a wonderful hat it was and how he built the best burrow in a secret pocket in the brim. Don't think about him, I plead, but bedazzled brain invites his image on the news, where other loud men draft the chronicle of lies, arguing over their meanings, as if a crucial line of verse from Frost, a voice from memory, droning and deliberate, advises me, just don't think. I cut it off there and put in an effort, as though studying for the blank page of an exam. But not thinking doesn't work, and too many others have beaten me to it. And isn't that the trouble? Isn't it? Anyway, didn't my old professor really say, don't think about polar bears? Now, I'm doing that. I'm not thinking about them. I'm not thinking about them as hard as I can. Thank you.
I'm gonna be the only one clapping, so feel free to unmute yourself if you want to clap. That was great, Ace. Awesome. I love hearing your voice there. That's great. Okay, next up we have Sarah Browning, who is one of our featured poets in this past issue with 2 poems in the issue. Hope to hear both of them and some other things too.
Thank you, Nathan, and everyone for being here tonight, and all the other readers as well. It's just such a pleasure after everything we've been through to be together however we can. So can you hear me? All good? Okay, well, I'm gonna read the 2 pieces in the issue. They're a little longer than my usual thing, and I like to yammer, so I'm just going to read these 2, I think. The first one's called Chicago Saturdays, 1969. My mother in the crappy kitchen before the renovation, boiling berries for jam. The kitchen is crappy, so she's painted it royal blue, and it shimmers in the Chicago heat. Strawberries popping on the ancient stove. On the ceiling, she's painted giant petals springing out from the one bare bulb. Oh, cast iron sink so deep, narrow metal cabinet counter tacked to the wall. How she labors to cheer. Washes and hulls the berries, cuts and boils, the summer beating on the city outside. She sterilizes jars and lids, decants the jam, seals the jars, sweat, and maybe by now we're cranky and the baby wailing. We've driven out to Indiana and picked our child bodies low to the ground, hers crouched and stooping, cradling one baby and pregnant with the next. Maybe she gives us a spoonful to calm us, mixes the baby's dry cereal, tries to smile when our father appears at last and does not pick up the baby. Looks at the sticky mess of the kitchen table, all these girls covered in it. Maybe this is one of those evenings when, for some infraction no one remembers or is even sure of at the time, he sends us to bed without our supper. If so, later on, after we've sat some time silent in our room, contemplating our guilt, our mother arrives with a tray of dry sandwiches and milk. Maybe this evening, though, the tray will hold a third little plate of bread and margarine with a taste of jam, a bit that did not fill a canning jar, red and shimmering, and a taste of the bright day, the better part in the Indiana berry patch, where my sister and I enlisted to pick, gorged ourselves on the sweetness. We'll nibble our bread and jam, our faces still tinged in red, and our mother will sit with us, ours alone, a few solemn moments. And for some reason, I can't get back to Zoom. There we go. Thank you. And the second poem is called Do I Call Them the Lonely Years? And for those of you who were on earlier, Richard mentioned that I'm getting married in 2 weeks, which is true. There was about 6 years between my long marriage breaking up and meeting this lovely new guy, and now 9 years. And Richard Peabody was one of the people who kept my work in publication in those difficult early years after my marriage first split up. So I want to shout him out and thank him. So this is for all the divorced people or people who've gone through it. Do I call them the lonely years? Nights alone in dive bars, watching baseball, sipping cheap gin. I was relieved to be alone, to loose the vigilance I'd kept over the man I'd lately left. Would he uncoil his impatience, his anger, not at me. Later, when I thought an evening a success, we'd relaxed a bit, but no, he'd tell me. I monopolized that one friend, danced too much, or maybe sang. Sunday brunch, a ruined thing. This cafe in particular tinged with his despair as I tried to read the paper, sip my overpriced macchiato, watch the city stroll by. He stared at the eggs congealing on his plate. I had already tried saying everything. There was nothing left. No, I wasn't lonely those years after, alone on the red cracked bar stool. The bartenders were hot middle-aged hipsters, and I'd chat them up a bit. Anthony Rendon was my man on the Nationals those years. But from what I overheard, I could tell they were jerks to the women in their lives. In a city of $16 martinis, I was happy for the cheap-ass booze, baseball on TV, Monday's half-price pizza. I know the pathos trope, middle-aged women drinking alone in dive bars. But fuck that. My body was learning relief. I had no one to watch over, no one's shoulders to monitor for that slumped, sad set, no sudden hard kick of a shoe abandoned too close to the door. Shoe mine, frozen body mine, child ghost frozen when the angry dad goes angry, me. Yes, I will have another gin and soda. My body is my own. Thank you.
I was typing in a comment. That was great, Sarah. Thank you so much. Those were wonderful poems, and so well read. Okay, next up, Barbara Westwood Deal. Did I say your last name correctly?
That's right.
Okay, excellent. I'm gonna roll.
Okay. Okay, the first poem is Ascensions on the Blue Ridge Parkway. This is the one that was in the issue. I just wanted to create a poem that has a little bit of a feeling of suspension and ascension, a little bit of hopefulness instead of my usual dark sort of stuff. Anyway, a view through coin-operated binoculars, a squirming child hoisted up onto a hip, always the erasure of clouds, the pale birches blurred into softening mountains, into an even softer sky. Always later, a sun or moonrise, always a river whispering to streams, to streamlets, to ascend as a suspension of rain, always a migration of hawks riding a rising tide of air, as if called by the child with outstretched arms, with quarters in her fist. The second poem I've been doing over the past few years, a series of poems based on postcards, real and imagined. This one was a real postcard, and this was published in South Florida Poetry Journal. It's Postcard from the Blossom Room, Palmolive Building, Chicago, undated. If you enjoy silence, you might feel at home in the Blossom Room, although you might not be silenced enough for the Blossom Room. Even the quietest among us makes sounds, a throat clearing, a cough, an unsolicited opinion or polite apology. You may feel the stares of the matronly plates, the ogling of the empty bowls. Note their flanks of cutlery, how the goblet knows its place above the knife, each napkin sharply creased into a linen tent, each place setting its own genteel encampment. You regard the armchairs, the paraded debutantes, the orchestrated seating, the chastened taffeta on their laps, the surrender of white gloves on their brocade, a hiss of hosiery below the satin folds, the baby's breath in a wrist corsage, hushed. Imagine yourself thus petaled, a peony in a cut glass vase, a blush on your blossoms, before the loss of breath as you are cinched in ribbon, a glimpse of some Narcissus in a gilt-edged frame, before your escort's proffered arm for the requisite waltz, before you are returned to the armchair, where you observe the stillness of the wallpaper blossoms, how each branch has been painted into a certain and unchanging season, to match the froth of skirt, its hidden seams and bodice pleats, the shadows of a wedding dress. If you enjoy stillness, you might feel at home in Blossom Room, although you might not be still enough for Blossom Room. Even the most subdued among us sometimes make a move. A narcissus snipped, a fish knife slipped inside a long white glove. Fun debutante place, huh? Okay, and this is my little twist on The Wizard of Oz. This was published in Fractured Lit. I had fun with this, and a prose poem. Dorothy paints poppies from memory. Because she is still shaking the doorknobs of this broken farmhouse, the cyclone heaved from its foundation and dropped like an anvil on someone's feet in ruby slippers. Because she still dreams she strolls through a field of poppies, 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 and breathes the opium breath of forgetfulness, but always wakes in wheat. Because she can't forget those scenes in Technicolor, so she squeezes the pigment of the shoe's red sequins onto her palette. Because she regrets the return to the sepia tones of the Kansas prairie. Because she can't shake the lion awake, and the scarecrow is hellbent for Emerald City, and the Tin Man is heartless. Because she wants to forget that she was the one who promised him a heart, and to forget that the crows are descending on the crops back home, and to forget that she has to be king of her own forest. Because the paint on a bristle brush is the Tin Man's axe to the canvas that stretches flat and straight as a road alongside a Kansas cornfield, and poppies are a siren song through the sheaves. Because she still hears monkey wings and fighting trees in the April wind, and hears poppies, poppies, poppies in her brush. Because she knows how to paint the burner flames below her Omaha State Fair balloon. Because she can't wait for a cyclone to take her. Thank you.
That's great, Barbara. Thank you so much. And a little shout out to the Baltimore Review, by the way.
Thank you.
Barbara is the founder and editor. How long has Baltimore Review been publishing now?
Oh geez, I think we're going into year 26 now.
Wow, congrats.
Glutton for punishment.
That's wonderful. And a great magazine too. Okay, next up we have James Jackson. Is it Kroll? I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your middle name?
Yes, it's Kroll. Sorry, I'm gonna move into the other office. I thought there was this guy Ryan reading in front of me.
Not a guy, but
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
there was.
I messed it up. I messed it up. Sorry, Ryan's next. Ryan, sorry about that, Ryan. My fault.
No worries, it happens.
And guess what? I have another surprise in a second, so I'll probably mess that up too. So next up, Ryan Holman, and then James, you're next.
Thank you. So I will start with the poem that appeared in the MLR issue, and I will start my clock so that I am respectful of folks' time. The poem that showed up in MLR is called Washi, and I wrote it after I took a paper making class at a studio in Silver Spring. Washi. Pull the paper at least 3 times. Shake it back and forth the first, side to side the second, back and forth again the third. Throw off the cold water. Dry your new paper in the air. This is how you make strong paper, fragile looking though it may be. Dive into the dark pool. Come up for air at least 3 times. Shake off the water of the first. Dive back in for a second. Let it drip off of you the third. Throw off the cold water. Dry your new skin in the air. This is how you make strong people, fragile looking though they may be. And I wanted to read a couple of other pieces while I am here. Some of these are actually fairly recent, but I felt like it was a good time to share them with the world. This one is called Orange, and I actually wrote it this year at Transformus, which is a local Burning Man event. And the poem is called Orange. My mother's favorite color, shouting a warning in contrast with green nature. Ignition signaling creation and destruction. Flames curling around effigies and branches crackling bright against gray sheets of rain. Which truths demand our attention in rusty relief? How much did we not see before accelerants and bright intent made them impossible to ignore as they use up their energy in a dynamic, final flashing attempt to warm us? And another piece, deliquescence. And for those who are not familiar with that word, I wasn't until I ran across it. It is when a mushroom is allowed to liquefy and you can actually make ink out of that. So yes, deliquescence. Blood has long been used in acts of creation, ideally one's own, freely given. Exploitation is creation scaled large and is thus often written in blood. We must forage for something new. The work will be messy and smell foul up until the very last moment. Change of this magnitude is not for the squeamish. We will have to ally with the forces of decomposition, and yet ourselves remain solid if we are to create anew. Those who can withstand the odious process will be able to spread their thoughts to the collective and write their tomes in vegan ink. And for my last piece, I want to read you a poem I called Dowser. One of my maternal relatives made his living finding water and ending droughts. I wonder if water is as thick as his blood. I travel places that only get rain 1 week a year and come home with mud in my clothes. Red outback sand becomes red outback mud everywhere. California ash turns hillsides brown with miniature rapids. Colorado flatiron dust settles and sucks at my boots as we struggle forward and the dogs eat higher ground. Sand to mud, ashes to mud, dust to mud. Perhaps as I wander instead of a clarion call, I should be listening for a squish. Thank you all.
Great, Ryan. Thank you. And shout out to Tacoma Park, my old stomping ground. Okay, so next up we have James Kroll Jackson. Take it away.
Yes, hello. James Cole Jackson, thanks so much for having me here. I'm going to read my one poem from Maryland Literary Review. It's called Barge. Where I go from here, I cannot say. Stacks of uneven boxes, manufactured forests, the power of chainsaw abused. Pull a cord, your teeth shiver. I didn't change the thermostat when you asked. I was absorbed into my own world by the time I walked downstairs, my mind an ugly barge. Never swam confidently enough to be here in the middle of the ocean. No north, no sun. Sharks in my mind, their triangle teeth and speed. Jonah and the whale, dinner time has passed. I do not plan to eat until I learn to quench my sorry thirst. And then seeing that it's the first day of fall, I'll read two short poems from my book that came out last year, Our Past Leaves. First one's called Attending a Polo Match on the 10-year anniversary of my father's death. Death is in the shriveled blue and purple hydrangea bouquet I gifted you. Kathy bought the same, smaller, but they did not last so much as linger. Mom calls me from Macy's, where she has sold colognes for 30 years and says she still struggles. But on the phone, I am drunk on a beach towel in a horse cemetery where Juan Carlos and his team of red ride in circles over forgotten bones, chasing a ghost white ball with a mallet through the empty space between goalposts. In the first chukker, my sister, who broke the news I somehow already knew with a call in the dark of a dorm room, texts me that she's thinking of me today. At halftime, when spectators are invited to flatten divots on the field with their shoes, Kathy leaves to help her family move. In the moment she reverses her car from our tailgating spot, I answer a call I am unaware of from my other sister before seeing her text ask if I am okay, that it sounded like I was in an accident and drove into grass. No, I tell her, I am day drunk among ponies in the withering days of summer. But what I don't tell her is on the way here, Kathy didn't see the turquoise minivan she nearly plunged into, and all we could do as passengers was clutch the leather beneath us as she sped full throttle on thin and curvy roads through the woods. We prayed to whatever tree was nearest, birches in a blur, prayed the whole forest to remind us that we are, briefly, breathing. And the last poem I'll read is called Eyes Mine. If I tried to count how many nights I've wandered alone to find myself, it would be on more fingers than all my family has. If I were worried only about eyes on walks stalking me, if I hadn't watched The Lion King at 7, and my father hadn't died, and my brother, I wouldn't be present in this field of wild cleavers with my Mufasas whispering weeds in the moonlight. Always that breeze tickling the hairs across my skin. That's why I don't walk barefoot in the grass. I don't trust strangers' hands, so I count tendrils on everything green in the dark that's growing, wondering if you remember how long it took for me to learn to tie my shoes. The laces multiplied in my field of math I fumbled over. My hands, I could never be precise enough to be a mechanic or a surgeon. We were in the basement and oh, you were so patient, television glowing and muted, dark news and wave band static. These negative film reels roll to nights embedded in memory when I try to sleep, when my lids are full of images. I can't believe I've stared at the surface of the moon so many nights over the years and just now saw there is your face, my face. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, James. Okay, next up we have Murali Kama, who will, I hope, share the story Storm Surge, among other things. So welcome, Murali.
Thank you, Nathan. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to share the podium, as it were, with such a talented bunch. My story, just a little bit about myself. I'm Murali Kama, as Nathan said, and I'm in Atlanta, where we edit, and I'm the managing editor of a magazine for the South Asian community, but I also write fiction on the side. Storm surge. Let me just start the timer because I may not be able to read the entire story. I wonder what happened, Jai says, picking up the remote control. With the hurricane, I mean. It was on the news. Nina, sitting beside him, puts her phone down before saying, hope it wasn't too bad. Selecting a recording on the DVR, Jai fast forwards and then hits play. The coastal town they were in a few days ago is getting battered. And as the camera pans to show the storm surge, they see the rain coming down in sheets on buildings and desolate streets lined with boarded up stores. The inky domed sky looks menacing, like the rushing water below, and the screeching wind sounds as if an orchestra's string section has gone berserk. Then they see the reporter standing close to the shore. It's quite a sight, brilliantly succeeding in keeping the viewers glued to the screen for what's obviously a wild weather drama. Reality TV couldn't get more real, and only one participant is needed. The agitated sea's rising waves, visible in the distance, seem like a colony of restless creatures that are snarling and spewing venom as they thrash about and seek to escape from their lair to cause mayhem. This coastal town, a few hours away by car, is halfway across the world from the coastal town where Jai's grandparents had lived. Before Jai emigrated with his family, following the death of his grandparents, he had visited them many times as a child. Both towns are on the East Coast, in different countries, of course. But despite a shared history of seasonal storms, they're very different. Even the word hurricane becomes cyclone in the other place, and sometimes it's called tufan, meaning typhoon in the local language. Making the reporter stand outside to tell viewers they shouldn't venture outside appears crazy, but the TV drama is gripping. Didn't some sage say the medium was the message? The reporter says the town seems to have lucked out despite the storm's ferocity. Only a few people are unaccounted for so far, though the number is bound to rise. To be fair, far from behaving like a cocky storm chaser, the reporter looks miserable, as if he'd rather be somewhere else, someplace dry, warm, and safe. He's just doing his job, which can be hazardous at times. The reporter's expression seems to mirror the look on the faces of interviewees who, having survived a traumatic experience, are breezily asked by poker-faced correspondents, "What was going through your mind?" What a bewildering question. How could traumatized people still trying to process what happened give a coherent response? What if they had panicked and their minds had gone blank? Again, it's all about the action, all about making the experience visceral for viewers. But Jai keeps his grouchy thoughts to himself, knowing that Nina would just shake her head. On Jai's last visit to see his grandparents, a cyclone pummeled their town, keeping residents indoors for days as howling winds tore down ramshackle buildings, knocked down trees and phone lines, and water inundated the streets, turning them into a network of canals that brought disease, death, and destruction. As always, the fishing communities suffered the most. In those days, weather forecasting was unreliable, and there were no warning signs or mass evacuations. Residents were left to fend for themselves, even as calamity loomed. Any coordinated effort was focused on rescue operations, which came after the cyclone no longer posed a threat. Now there's a more sophisticated system in place to prevent mass casualties. But while that's working, for the most part, avoiding heavy damage is harder. Not only are building codes violated, but the local government is unable or unwilling to meet the housing needs of ordinary people. Then there's climate change, bringing uglier storms that seem more frequent. Almost 5 minutes, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
No, go ahead and finish. You're almost done.
Okay, I've got just it's not a long story. Thank you. Then there's climate change, bringing uglier storms that seem more frequent. Unlike today, many people back then stayed in their flimsy homes when a cyclone struck, and they often perished. Now there are designated shelters, and since they are widely promoted, the residents of poorer quarters go there to ride out the storm, returning to their dwellings only after they have ceased to be death traps. Nina's phone rings, diverting her attention, and she steps away to take the call. The news report is about to end, and Jay knows it will be followed by a jarring drug commercial focusing on indigestion, impotence, or incontinence. Though he wants to turn off the TV and make dinner, the remote control remains frozen in his hand. The parka-clad reporter, trying to stay steady as he's buffeted by the fierce wind and rain, reminds Jay, strangely enough, of the man he had glimpsed through the window of his grandparents' house all those years ago. That man, his face contorted, was crouching in front of a small medical clinic on the other side of the street. Why was he there? And why had nobody asked him to take shelter in the house? Had he come looking for a doctor, only to find the clinic shut? Or did the cyclone destroy his dwelling, making him homeless? Was he perhaps lost and disoriented? Jai had no answers, and he didn't know what happened to him. Did he eventually get help or leave? Or, well, anything else was too awful to contemplate. All Jai remembers now is the terrified expression on the man's face as he cowered under a dangerously swaying peepal tree under the wall, his body stooped, shaking and soaked. There was nobody else around him, and Jai never saw anybody who looked more alone and desperate. We'd better go inside now, the reporter says hoarsely, making Jai snap back. Clutching his hood as he bends over with a grimace, the reporter says, "It's getting worse." "Yes, of course," the news anchor in the studio says, looking relieved. "Take shelter, y'all. Be safe." Then turning to her studio audience, she chirpily notes, "Stay tuned. We'll be right back with some great tips for travelers looking for bargains." Thank you.
That was Greg Morale. Thank you so much.
Sorry, it
and
took
thank
a
you
little
for reading
longer.
for us. No worries, you're fine. Thank you for sharing that. So next up, we have Eleanor Levine.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I'm going to read two poems. I'm speaking to you from my car. I just got back from the Met in New York. I had to meet some friends from Texas. My life is always like that, in transit. Anyway, this poem is called The Blue Jew, and it was inspired by my brother Stephen, who asked me to write a poem about Louis Farrakhan, who to many people is considered a nemesis, especially because he's so homophobic and anti-Semitic. Blue Jew. I am Louis Farrakhan's favorite Jew. a lesbian intellectual with a purple Izod sweatshirt. I am a bilious girl on my birthday with food poisoning from ribs like mama made. I go to the ER, a pipe in my throat connects to Moses. All Jews connect to Moses or Freud or Einstein or Rothschild. Me, the Hebe, rests near a patient who prays to Jesus before she and her husband have sex. It is the mercantile class they are offending. The blue Jew, black and blue, dies with a pipe in her throat without redemption. And that's sort of about how I've been sick these past few years. I was in the hospital with a pipe in my throat, and I made them take it out because it was too disturbing to keep in. The next poem is apropos to where I'm sitting. I'm currently in the car parking lot at the Middletown, New Jersey train station. And I find a lot of contemplation and meditation occurs in parking lots. I did spend a lot of time with my ex-girlfriend Liz in a parking lot, and I found it to be rather meditative. This poem, however, was inspired by the photographer writer Paul Vlachos, who's a good friend of mine. He's also the brother of poet Nicholas Christopher, who I met when I was taking classes at Columbia years ago. And he did a picture of a car that was in a parking lot. So this is called Civility in the Parking Lot, also in this issue. And it's the last poem I'll be reading of the two. Civility in the Parking Lot. New Jersey tar lines deconstruct one's brain in a Volvo. The calm of an arc. Your ass on a leather chair heated. A mobile phone next to you, squeaking and periods. God is in relaxed mode, and you do yoga or gyrate to the Ramones or phone John Hinckley Jr. and ask if he has recovered from Jodie Foster, or Jodie Foster if she's forgiven the demeanor of storefront mall highway scenery that boasts New Jersey in fitfuls of irony. A library of parked cars unfolds as Volvos stop where gas links the mind, besotted by racial nightmares if you're black, or police don't ask if you're white, or animal rights activists smash your windows because the dog is left in 90-degree weather. The car mollifies the soul more than Icelandic waterfalls. I wanted to thank you, and I also wanted to thank Nathan, who always encourages and gives a very democratic chance to everyone without good connections. So thank you for letting me read.
Thank you, Eleanor. That was great. I loved it. Okay, next up is Richard Peabody. I'm just looking for, oh, there you are. Richard Peabody to tell us about Mars as the pick-me-up planet.
There we go. Here we go. I'm unmuted. Okay, the story is long. I'm only going to read a couple, like a page and a half. Mars is the pick-me-up planet. Saturday. I'm between COVID shots, retired, nothing to do. The libraries aren't taking book donations. So I spend my days cruising from one little free library to another, take a book, leave a book. I like how they vary in design. Here a caboose, there a barn, how some are linked to the free library system with tiny plaques and serial numbers, while others are renegade free libraries and not included on any neighborhood maps, which is fine by me. I keep to a regular circuit. I prefer obscure books. Most of what I read isn't in current library catalogs or available on Kindle. I have all these boxes of giveaway books just sitting underfoot. I even wondered about having a safe distance book sale, but I'm not that comfortable around people yet. And then there's all the books my wife left behind, mostly mysteries and books about diseases. Not my thing. It's funny, I never noticed these little book trees before, blissfully unaware, like I was about babies in strollers before we had kids. Didn't pertain to my reality until it did, strictly on a need-to-know basis. I used to drive aimlessly trying to make babies and toddlers fall asleep. Now I drive aimlessly to find free little libraries. Through trial and error, I've found some folks who leave treasures. I steer clear of the libraries near schools or playgrounds because they pretty much house YA or children's books. I follow my gut more than I follow the map. I drive around with 2 boxes of books and I travel neighborhood by neighborhood. Yesterday, I hit a bunch around Sibley Hospital when then the kayaker hippie neighborhood across the Maryland line out to Glen Echo and on toward Potomac. Wednesday, Falls Church today. I try some different streets and find a 3-level library filled with sci-fi, old pulp paperbacks, thrillers. Maybe this is where the folks who owned hole-in-the-wall books on Route 7 live. I don't recognize the guy in the Todd Rundgren Utopia tour tee mowing the lawn, but honestly, I don't recognize anybody when they're masked and have gone to seed. R.A. Lafferty, J.G. Ballard, Sheckley, Simic, and Sturgeon, some Conan books, yet I pass them by for Tarzan and the Ant-Men by Edgar Rice Burroughs, one of the first authors I ever read. I liked Tarzan, though only the Greystoke film ever captured the written words. I adored the Martian series, Barzoom, Dejah Thoris, and John Carter. I waited my entire life for a movie adaptation, and Disney blew it. I loved the movie, but the advertising campaign was an unmitigated disaster. They should have kept the actual title, Princess of Mars. Plus, my kids' friends ridiculed them for liking it, told them it ripped off Star Wars. I told my kids it was the other way around. Star Wars ripped off the Martian stories. Life's not fair. No sequels will ever be made. I'm daydreaming when I realize a dog is barking, a huge German Shepherd bounding past a lawnmower and heading my way. The Utopia guy abandons the mower and gives chase, but he's not nearly fast enough. He's yelling, "Sammy, stop, damn it, Sammy, come here." Sammy jumps and I shove the paperback in his jaws. He bites down hard, shakes his head, looking pretty confused, and that second allows me to grab his collar. He immediately starts pulling away and barking and shaking his head, but I'm not letting go. And when Sammy freezes, we stare at each other until Lawnmower Man arrives and takes over the collar hold. Thursday, sipping iced coffee from a black-on-black Contigo on the start deck steps. The red maples in the yard are losing their helicopter seedlings. The air is alive with the tiny whirlybirds. The sound they make as they doink the roof and then slide down the shingles to the gutter or the ground is so tantalizing. I shift to my right and a red fox moves across the yard and effortlessly over the fence. Thank you.
That's great, Richard. Thank you so much. And it was just a pleasure to have one of your stories in Maryland Literary Review.
Thank you, Nathan. MLR and this cast of readers, this is great. Thank you all.
And last but not least, Brandon Spalletta, who is one of the Rest in Readings regulars, I have to say. You get to finish this off.
All right. Thank you so much. I want to take a moment to just thank each and every reader who has been here and shared their work. It's been, as usual for Rest in Readings, an eclectic group of voices and such a treat. So I've enjoyed all of it. Thank you so much. So I'm going to begin with my poem Grief, which was published in Maryland Literary Review recently. Thank you. Shout out to Nathan. And then if I have time, I'll get to a few more, starting off with Grief. Grief is a heavyweight boxer who's trained his whole life for 12 long rounds with the masterpiece you thought you were building. Prefers haymaker after haymaker, but doesn't discriminate against stiff jabs. Utilizing superior footwork, he always keeps you on the outside of your old life, looking back in. Right when you begin to believe that it might just be time to move forward and smile, when you recall the embrace of your brother from another mother and the putrid stench of cigarettes, belly laughing with too many shots of whatever steadied his hand long enough to run the pool table. Grief will sidestep and counterhook, leaving your vision on wobbly knees, with the hollow promises of growing old ringing in your ears like the thunderstorms you used to watch. He'll pour it on and push the pace after the contest is over, ignoring any towel your corner threw in with mercy, taunting you with his own Ali shuffle, hands high in the air, claiming victory and the memory of each soul you burn to hold again, and you'll wipe your vision clear and bite down on your mouthpiece for another go at love. So the second poem I'm going to read is called Love Poem for the Universe. I was there at the beginning, and together we were home. You recycled my stardust for millennia, like laundry, my energy flowing unknowingly like electricity through a filament. We are an epiphytic symbiosis, the only orchid of its kind hitching a ride on the great tree of life, blooming with petals of our poetry every now and again. Chaos theory depicts your center, despite not knowing all the facts, tries to throw cosmic wrenches masquerading as bad days and years into our right now plans, like winds through the web of a spider continuously reconnecting vertices until the next desired meal. Those are the sweet nothings you whisper when the world paints itself larger or smaller than just enough, that you'll always hold steadfast faith in change, and the intonations of your voice heralded our poem across eons of cosmos, tidal waves of ripples. God nods his head silently, like yesterday's sunset. There's beauty in the simplest of remembrances, and I'll miss you when you're gone. I'm going to go with the next poem called The Anticipation. Last February, this was featured at the, or I'm sorry, I think it was April, at Washington Rose Publishing House Rights. So this is a poem I wrote for when my wife went into labor with our son, who's now 20 months old. It was a very long labor, and the anticipation was killing me. And I remember thinking and saying to her, hey, do you mind if I write that poem? And she was like, you know what, go ahead. And so this is what it was. The Anticipation. Mere hours dwarf 9 months, and each second piles elation and pickled regret in my throat, like two young quarreling brothers. You're coming down a highway your own way. No red lights or speed limits, escorted by ancestors at a never-ending high noon, to where we count days like spare change, pennies, really, hoping we'll forget that we left a few on the ground and that someday we'll get to go back. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.
That was great, everyone. Thank you so much for participating. This is a wrap. I'll see some of you hopefully in person October 30th at 5:30 in Reston at the Reston Youth Bookshop. And again, thanks so much to everyone for coming, whether you read or you just listened and enjoyed. Everything here can be found online on the Maryland Literary Review website. So thanks again, and nice meeting people for the first time and seeing old friends. Take care. Have a nice night.
Thank you, Nathan, and everyone. What a great evening.
Yeah, it was lovely. Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
Nathan and everyone. Bye. It was
Bye.
lovely hearing you all. Goodbye.
Bye.
Great to see everyone.